How many people here tonight have been personally affected by cancer? How many of you guys know how to ride a bicycle? Has anyone here ever bicycled farther than 100 miles in one single day? Well, just like most of you guys, prior to the summer of 2014, I could have only said yes to the first two questions also. You see, the sad fact is cancer is a terrible disease that affects almost every single one of us in some way, shape, or form. Flashback, summer, June 2013. I get a phone call from my cousin Brock Shower. He goes, Joe, dude, what would you think about biking across America? Let's do it. It'd be the funnest thing ever. Come on, you with me? And I'm like, okay, Brock, you got my attention. This is something I want to do, especially with you. I said, Brock, let me think a little bit. I'll call you back. So I got to thinking. His mother has stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer, and that's my aunt, and she had it at the time of the phone call. And then we both have, family friends who have had cancer and died from it, or who currently have cancer, or who are survivors. And I also thought, I always see these people doing these endurance athletic feats with running, biking, swimming, so that I can raise support, money, awareness for any number of diseases just like cancer. But why not? Why can't we do that? We're totally capable of it. We're super energetic, if you can't tell, and athletic and simply adventurous and wild at heart. And we like to help people too. So I called him back and I said, Brock, let's bike across America. But let's do it for cancer. And the rest is history. In the summer of 2014, my cousin Brock Shower, one of my best friends Devin Coyle, and I bicycled from Bismarck, North Dakota, through 10 states, all the way down to St. Petersburg, Florida, on what was called the Bike to Believe Tour. And on this Bike to Believe tour, we raised almost $250,000, which includes in-kind donations for cancer. But the best part of this thing is that we stopped at over 20 cancer centers, cancer clinics, and cancer support groups so that we could interact with patients, people battling cancer, and we wanted to get to know their stories, and not just their cancer stories. We want to get to know their stories and inspire these people, but they kind of flipped it around, and they were the ones who inspired us and taught us so much about hope, never giving up, loving and supportful relationships, and finally, positivity. Now, one of the most notable stories that we heard was told by a man named Bill at the Virginia Piper Cancer Institute in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It's the guy way on the left there. And he said that a long, long time ago, he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And for those of you who don't know, pancreatic cancer is a terrible cancer to have. The odds are not in your favor, and it's a terrible prognosis. So he had been experiencing symptoms of jaundice, yellowing of the eyes and the skin. So he goes in. He just wasn't feeling good. He had to get checked out, and it turns out that he had a cancerous tumor on his pancreas that was blocking his bile duct. And that's why they caught it at the time they did. Doctor calls him into the office, and he says, Bill, sit down. You have pancreatic cancer. There are no treatments out there available. You're going to die within 6 months. Just go home and get your affairs in order. And I'm thinking, what do you do when you're presented with this tragic news? Are you just going to give up, go home, await your imminent death, or are you going to do something about it? Are you going to push and fight through? And Bill, that's what he did. He came to the conclusion that cancer didn't have a grasp on him. He just so happened to have cancer, and he was going to fight and never give up until he kicked cancer in the rear, and that's exactly what he did. He went and he got a second opinion, got in a series of treatments, and today he's been cancer-free in remission for the last 13 years. Him not giving up, him having the attitude he did, turned 6 months into 13 years and counting, and now he's a volunteer at the Virginia Piper Cancer Institute in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Another great lesson we learned was the importance of support, and not just support when you're biking across America, but when you're battling cancer. We met this couple at the Church of the Nativity in Fargo, North Dakota, a cancer support group. And this couple had been married for 50 years, and that's a long time this day and age. And when you get married, there's vows in sickness and in health, and they put these vows to the test. Throughout their marriage, they had been diagnosed at separate times with cancer, and the man had gotten cancer, so his wife dropped everything and became his caregiver. Everyone who has cancer, they have their caregivers, and they cater to all the needs, and you need that tender loving care around the clock. And he gets rid of the cancer, cancer-free, remission. His wife ends up getting cancer, and he did the same for her, and that just right there was the epitome of carrying out your vows. And, but the lady said something to us that totally inspired every single one of us. Brock, Devin, myself, and my mom. She drove a truck and pulled a camper. And it was great. But she said, if today isn't a good day, just remember it can always be worse. And there's always tomorrow for it to be better. And man, that was such a positive attitude to have within just an amazingly supportful and loving relationship. And we found such a contrast on this journey through 10 states. You know, we saw everything from the seat of a bicycle. It's much different than when you're in a car, you're, you know, in an enclosed cab, and you can't really smell anything, and you're going 65 miles an hour. But seat of a bicycle, it's sensory overload. You're seeing all of this beauty, and you're smelling everything, whether it's, you know, roadkill every 5 miles or black smoke from diesel trucks. And you know, one moment you're in the national deciduous forest, and then the next you're in the deciduous, or you're in the smoky Appalachian mountains, and then before you know it, you're standing there with your feet in the warm white sands, looking over the turquoise waters of the Gulf of Mexico, smelling that fresh ocean breeze. And then there's the other part of the trip where you're in the chemotherapy ward of a cancer hospital. And there's such a dry heaviness, and what really comes to my mind is the lady right in the corner. We walk into it was a cancer hospital in Nashville, Tennessee. And big chemotherapy ward, massive room, much bigger than this, 10 plus people of all walks of life at their chemo stations. You know, they're surrounded by their loved ones, but this lady stuck out way over in the corner. She was laying there. She looked lifeless, sleeping in her chair. And dark around the eyes, pale skin, lost all her hair, weak, fragile looking. And then 5 minutes later, from my peripherals, I see her pop up, right? And she does this hop, skip over to the bathroom. She had just gotten done with her treatment. And I was like, whoa. So we went over and we talked to her, and right there and there, and she was just radiated this positivity, and she was so bubbly, and she was, you know, she looked like what we would perceive as being sick, but she was so full of life. And she was telling us to keep going. Yeah, you'll get to Florida, no problem. And I'm like, yeah, of course, compared to what you're doing. You know, she's battling life and death, and she had this positivity, and that's the thing. Every single person that we met on this trip who had cancer and their family members, they had a few things in common, but the biggest one was this crazy, amazing positivity towards living life, living it to the fullest every single day, and they never complained, ever. I mean, think of this. You're sitting in a chair being pumped full of chemotherapy. Yeah, it's treating the cancer, but at the same time, you know, it's wreaking havoc on your body. You're becoming weaker and weaker, and sicker and sicker, and you feel like throwing up all the time, and you know, you're losing your hair, which is traumatic. But at the same time, these people are so full of life, and they're so positive. It's just so contagious. And you know, we met this guy in Fargo, North Dakota, Roger Maris Cancer Clinic, amazing place. And we're waiting there in the waiting room to go on a simple tour of the cancer clinic. And we see this guy sitting down on his laptop, sitting up straight, just ready to go. Just, you know, he was passionate even. He was talking to people on the phone. Then he strikes a conversation with us, and he's like, hey, wait, 3 crazy Mandan dudes biking across, bike to believe? That is so cool. I love the idea. Matter of fact, I donated $50 to you guys 2 days before I found out I had cancer. And I'm like, wait, you have cancer? I remind you, we're lethargically sitting in this waiting room waiting to go on a tour of a cancer clinic, just a simple tour. We had biked 200 miles in the last 2 days. Yeah, we were tired, but never did we think that this guy would be waiting, and the way he was so energetic and so positive and so full of life, never did we think he'd be waiting to go into a treatment of chemotherapy of all things. But you know what's great is I just saw him again in Big Sky this last weekend, and we were in the hot tub, and I look over and I see this dude, and he smiled and he looked familiar, and he goes, Joe, Mandan guy, biked across America, and I'm like, yeah, that's me. Jason, he's like, yeah, and then we talked, and he was asking me about the trip, and I'm like, no, like, how are you doing? And he goes, oh, I'm doing great, cancer-free. You know what? It was a tough summer, but remained positive, and we pushed through, and we're here right now talking in this hot tub. And I'm like, you know, Jason in that hot tub was the same Jason as he was in that waiting room waiting to go get chemotherapy at that cancer clinic. Same person. It was like he never had cancer. And maybe that's the real sickness. The real sickness isn't cancer. The real sickness is having a negative perception on life, a negative attitude. You know, all these stories are just some examples of the many lessons we learned in the short span of 35 days biking through 10 states down to Florida. You know, and there's so many opportunities that we have to just have a positive perception. Yeah, it might be hard at sometimes, but just think there's worse things out there. Just be positive. And it can be hard, but you just got to do it. But looking back, you know, I was thinking, it's crazy that I didn't even have a bicycle until 2 months before I left for Florida. I mean, I didn't really train, to be honest with you. But the beauty of that is anybody can learn and train themselves to ride a bicycle just like anybody can learn to have a positive perception on life, a positive attitude.